Hello, John. What a pleasure for me as a queer organizer who got involved in this movement mainly because my friends were sick and I was young and I got to be gay for the first time outside of my home. So I'm super excited to be and privileged to be able to have this conversation with you in particular. For those who aren't familiar with John Laird, District 17, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz. He's running for Senate. He also worked on the Santa Cruz AIDS Project from 91 to 1994. He believes in health care for all, climate change, and affordability for the middle class. I would love for you to take a few minutes to introduce yourself, and then, of course, let us know about that pivotal moments in your life when you became a proponent of cannabis.
Well, first, thank you. It's great to be here, and I appreciate that introduction. That was really sweet. And I think for those of you that don't know me, I've had a 40-year career in public policy. I was mayor and city council member in Santa Cruz. I was the community college trustee. I was in the state assembly for 6 years. I was the one cabinet member for Jerry Brown that went first day to the last day, all 8 years, as Secretary for Natural Resources. And as Felicia just mentioned, I ran the Santa Cruz AIDS Project, our local AIDS service agency, at the height of the epidemic, which was an amazing experience. And when you look at that career and the question that you asked about the first moment, I have to be honest, I'm from Santa Cruz. I don't know when the first moment was. I think the question is where did it come up in the activism? And I remember a hilarious moment where, I think it was in the 1980s, where I was really active in the Democratic Party, and we had the annual Democratic dinner, and John Vandekamp, who was the Attorney General at the time, who I really liked in general, said to the Democratic dinner that he was using Vietnam-era helicopters on busts of marijuana grows, and the crowd booed him. And it made me laugh at the time because he was so unclear about his audience. And then when I ran the AIDS Project, it was a number of tough years. It was before the drug cocktail. And we had very active people involved in cannabis as medicine for our clients. And there were grows that were linked to it that have been historic. And, you know, we were really sort of working together. I think that the main moment in public was when I was Resources Secretary. I had the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Water Resources, CAL FIRE, agencies that were involved in the areas where there were illegal grows. And there was one particular one that I remember that was in northeast Mendocino County, where they had diverted an incredible amount of water illegally. They were putting pesticides in the waterways. They had chopped down an amazing number of trees. And it allowed me in public to say, wouldn't it be great if we had a legal, regulated industry that really didn't have these impacts on our natural resources in California? And it has given me a different way into the issue than a lot of people, because it really allowed me to hold up that stuff and say, legal, regulated is the way to go. And so that's a brief account of my long tortured history.
Well, we're grateful for all of your work, that's for sure. So thank you for still being here all of these years later in particular. So as somebody who's had that experience in particular with knowing the beginnings and being here predating a lot of what we saw with Prop 215, what do you envision for our industry right now? Where do you see us going? What do we need? What's going to work? What's in the best interests?
Well, first, I should just tell you a story that answers one of the questions that you asked beforehand. It's like whether I had visited facilities. And I should just tell you that I've lost track of how long ago it was. It was maybe the beginning of last year. I went and visited the Natural Healing Center in Grover Beach and took a tour. And in the course of the tour, the people that were giving me the tour, I said to them, you know, this is the first dispensary I've ever been to. And they stopped in their tracks and they looked at me and they said, you're from Santa Cruz and you have never been to a dispensary? And I started laughing and said, I'm sorry, the whole city was a dispensary for decades. It was like there were not issues here. And it led to me making a point of, I visited the SC labs and toured them in Santa Cruz. I visited the grow that's, I think, aligned with the Apothecarium at Kitayama Brothers. I participated in the ribbon cutting for Kind People Center. I made a point of going and seeing every part of the industry as it exists in my local area. And it gets to your question, because I think that whenever you establish something new, and whenever you have revenue-starved governments, particularly at the local level, everybody gets their hand out. And so what's happened in the battle for revenue and taxation is, I think that it's been set initially at an artificially high level. And it really competes. There have to be people in illegal grows that say, okay, I've got 5 grows. If I just get busted on 1 or 2, I am economically ahead anyway for staying in the black market rather than coming into the light of regulation. And until we make it competitive, until we support the people that have taken the risk to move into the regulatory system, we're not going to have a successful system. And we've had this tragedy here the last few weeks where the fire in Santa Cruz, they just announced yesterday or the day before that it has taken 925 residences. It's in the top 10 record-wise in the history of the state for loss. And last weekend, the sheriff took me just on a one-on-one tour of the burned out area and into the mountains. And I actually talked to him, since we had all this time together, about regulation of the cannabis industry, about what they're doing. They've made still some busts of illegal grows in Santa Cruz County, and why he thought, it was interesting to me, he thought it was important to have a competitive industry in relation to what he had to deal with for the illegal grows and what the impacts were of the legal grows. He seemed, I don't know if that's exactly the way he says it in public, but privately he was in the right place. And so to get to what your next question will be, we have to figure out a way to make it competitive. I think everybody rushed to tax. And while the initiative was clear on what some of the taxation is at the state level, it is more voluntary or set differently at the local level. And I think that's where some of the issues really are. We have to make it advantageous for local governments not to tax the regulated business out of business. And I think that's where the battle is going to be. And I'm anxious to work on it. I'm not 100% sure on what the path is, but I know what the goal is, and that's what we have to do.
Well, thank you for that. And you did answer a little bit of the questions that were coming in from the audience, so I appreciate that in particular. And this was very specific to medical cannabis, one of the questions that we were asked. And as somebody who's been around and has been a champion for the movement, what are you going to do to transition to be that same champion for the movement regarding eliminating or reducing taxes for medical cannabis?
Well, I think that it always seemed to me to be a little different for medical cannabis. I mean, it's a necessity, and we have always been at the state had a different taxation policy for necessities. I mean, basic food isn't subject to the sales tax. There are certain other things, and we just have to see. The one thing I have to say, which has been an interesting experience, for a year and a half, I've been staffing myself on everything. I keep my own schedule after having an assistant for 8 years that did that. I do all the research on issues myself. I have not turned in a campaign questionnaire, and I think I've done 60 that I didn't complete myself completely in its entirety. And so I'm really looking forward to having a staff that could research some of these issues or work with the advocates to research some of these issues, to look specifically at where there are places that movement can be done. And when I was in the assembly, I very carefully had this process for vetting every bill idea. We went to the proponents, we went to the potential opposition, we went to every policy legislative committee, we went to every legislative budget committee, we would go to the governor's office, and I would make a decision about how to do it and whether it was doable. And I look forward to going through that process with this issue. It's like, where are all the players that are in the system? Where would you encounter opposition? Is it from League of Cities and the California counties because they think they're losing revenue? Or is it, can you prove that if you bring more people into the system and lower the level of taxation, that the revenue actually might even be equal for them? What points can you make that are compelling in the argument? And that's what I would look forward to working on and working with people on, because it seems to me that having been budget chair for most of my run in the assembly, the powerful arguments are to be able to make the revenue arguments. If you can argue that if you brought half of the illegal grows into the regulatory system because we were cracking down, you could cut taxes by a certain amount and still be held harmless. That's a powerful argument in allowing you to do it. And I would want to research to make sure that I could make that argument in a way that would be real.
Thank you. I hope that answered some of the questions that were posed. Lisa had mentioned, and not necessarily a question, but that paying taxes on drugs that people are, that we don't pay taxes on drugs that people OD on, and that there should be zero taxes on medical cannabis. As a patient myself, I just had to echo what she had said. I know there's a lot of work that needs to still be done to ensure that that is a possibility, but you seem like a fabulous ally and somebody who can definitely help us move that needle in particular.
Well, let me say one additional thing quickly, and that is that I used to have this saying that you could fix revenue problems when the sun was shining. That was the best time to do it. And the fact that we're in an economic downturn is going to make it a little harder, because reducing revenues to governments in an economic downturn politically makes it harder. And yet, if you start marching down the path, then you're there and you're ready in case the circumstances change. And I'm not ruling out that you couldn't do it now. I'm just saying that factor makes it harder.
Understood. So one other question that just came in is, how can we redirect the political clout of the prison guard union, as well as ALEC?
And what do they, I'm sorry, redirect the power? You mean empower people other than the prison guards union?
I think it's just, the question is, how can we redirect the political clout of the prison guard? And if you can, because I know you have a lot to say, keep this last answer under a minute so that we can bring Alex on. And then I would love, I'm going to probably be reaching out to you.
Yeah. I think we shouldn't be incarcerating people that way. And there's certain things that we can do to make it a winner. And that's what we would have to do, is try to figure out a way to make that argument and do it. And I'll just work with you on that. That's less than a minute.
You're fabulous. Thank you so much for this time. I truly do feel like really blessed that I got to have you in my home and all of this rich history and all of this innovation that you brought. Thank you so much for your time, John. Folks, go vote for him.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you all in person.